This is F.95.
These lenses are the rebirth of cool. And this is hopeless romanticism at its finest.
You know, these do have a little bit of girth to them, but they are extremely well made. I mean, this is as good as a Leica R lens, although I don't believe that these are weather sealed. Of course, neither are Leica Rs. But anyway, this is the 17.5, and this is the equivalent of 35mm, and it has the background separation equivalency of f1.8. The reason why I don't say depth of field is because technically this actually has the same amount of depth of field as a full frame, but you're cropping in quite a bit. So to not confuse people, let's say separation of background. To me, that just makes more sense. But anyway, it is a little bit different. The f-stop is on the front, and at first I didn't like this. It's very easy to move, although it is clicked, but I still think it would work for video because it is very easy and delicate. You know, you don't really pick up the clicking sound from it, which is a good thing. The focus has a long draw, so it probably would be good for video. And this particular lens focuses down to about 5 3/4 inches. Not really a macro lens, but you know, then again, this is just a high-speed lens. It's like this lens is twice as fast as your ass, no matter how you look at it. This is a very normal focal width, and you know, like I said, they're heavy. And on the OMD EM5-II, I've got the grip on here, and the grip really makes a huge difference. I mean, makes it very easy to hold. And I have shot lots of weddings with these, so you know, they actually hold up out in the field pretty good. But let me show you what they're like on another camera. All right, here it is on the Pen F. And you know, I talked about the ergonomics of the Pen F, and it's great with the small Olympus primes. But when you put something heavy like this on here, your thumb starts to get sore. And mine's already getting sore from just holding it for a couple of minutes. And this is the 42.5, and it has the 35mm equivalency of 85mm, and the separation of background factor with f.95 means it's the equivalent of f.18. So really an excellent portrait lens and extremely shallow depth of field. When I say the background separation, I mean separating your objects from the background, but there are a lot of cases when you're actually doing headshots where this looks like f.95, and it's impossible to achieve with anything else. So, you know, we'll take a look at those here in just a second, but I just wanted to show you that these are almost identical lenses. You know, this is just a tank. It's heavy, but God, it's good. I love it. And extremely sharp. So let's dive into this and see what you guys think. The 42.5. This lens by itself weighs 20 ounces. This is the 45mm f1.2. This weighs 4.3 ounces. The Pen F, the actual camera itself, weighs 14.9, so 15 ounces. So slightly heavier than that. Now let's compare this over here. This is the 17.5. This weighs 19.2 ounces, a hair lighter. The OMD EM5-II weighs 19.10 ounces, so they're about the same weight with the grip on. Now the Leica, which is the closest thing I have to that, is going to be 7.1 ounces. And this is the 25mm f1.4. Just to give you an idea, let's put both of these on there. Both of these are still less than this one lens. Here's a little 12mm. So if we put the 12, the 45, and the 25 on there, These three lenses still don't weigh as much as this lens. You know, these Voightlander lenses aren't really considered that heavy, but for this system, they're definitely surprisingly heavy. Okay, let's give these a try. Threw a neutral density on here, 8x, and we're going to try it out at f1.2 and see what this looks like. Okay, I like that. Good use of props. Okay, let me switch lenses. So this was the 42.5. Now we're going to go over to the 17.5 and see what that looks like. Alright, let's take a look at a few images here just so you can get the feel of what this is like. This was shot at f1.2 and a very shallow depth of field, but very sharp. You can see I'm focused in on his eye. Everything else is out of focus. Wherever you have highlights, you see the blades of the aperture. Now this is the only flaw in this lens design that I think I found. So it's got a 10-bladed aperture, which is good, but the aperture blades are not curved. So anytime you have specular highlights, you're going to see the shape of the aperture, but when you don't have specular highlights, it's actually very round and smooth. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, I just wish that they were rounded, not a big deal. So the 42.5 at f.95, this is a perfect portrait lens, and this is kind of what people like, that swirly bokeh background. Anyway, let's just take a look at this image. Now you can see this guy's hair is in focus, nose and eyes are in focus, and his shoulder is in focus, but everything else completely out of focus. I mean, just a great shallow depth of field. Again, in this photo, I just wanted to show you the quality of the blur in the background and the sharpness. So this is stopped down to f1.2, the same lens, and this is what I think of as picture perfect. I mean, this has got great color, perfect melted background, smooth bokeh, great fall off, no specular highlights, and these again are unedited photos. This is the 17.5, and this is from a car show, and this is shot at f1.4. And you can see here, this lens is extremely sharp where I was focusing in on. The sun is directly behind me. We're getting a little bit of chromatic aberrations from that sunlight, but I mean, really minor. And you can see again in those specular highlights, you can see the shape here. That's what's letting me know that I shot at f1.4. But when we look at the background where there's no specular highlights, it's very smooth. And no onioning in the bokeh either, which is really nice. So anyway, let's bounce ahead here. Macro on the 17.5. Again, this is shot at f1.4. Just really nice and soft. I just love the color. And this is the 42.5 on the same batch, and this again is stopped down to f1.4, and extremely shallow depth of field, but just great color rendering. I just love that. Anyway, let's talk about vignetting. So this is the 17.5 wide open at f.95. Yellow and shaded corners, as expected. Now, as you stop it down to f1.2, the corners start to go away. And then when you hit f1.4, this is very interesting, the color changes. And this becomes a very neutral white balance. And at f1.4, you still see a very tiny bit of shadowing in the corners, but it's not bad. At f2, vignetting's gone completely, and this thing is just great all the way through f16. So the 42.5 at f.95, again, shading in the corners, not a big deal. At f1.2, all that starts to go away, and by f1.4, this lens is phenomenal. Perfect from 1.4 all the way through f16. All right, so let's talk about the astigmatism of this really quick. And I never talk about astigmatism with my lenses because modern lenses today don't really have it. But when you talk about super fast f.95 lenses, they definitely have it. And this has got that swirly bokeh wide open that I like to see from Zeiss lenses. And you know, the 50mm 1.4 planar T does this, and it's, you know, it makes it nice to look at. And as you get to the outside edges, that circular highlight becomes compressed. That's just because of the astigmatism. And this is actually called Sagittal Astigmatism. And this is very common to get that swirly bokeh. That's the only reason why I'm mentioning it. Now, when we stop it down, you'll notice the astigmatism changes completely. When you stop it all the way down, this is actually what we're looking at. And one thing that I never talk about is coma. Now, coma is a factor that comes into play if you're shooting stuff at night. So what we're looking at here is coma, and this time the sequins are in focus before they were out of focus. And you can see that white smearing that kind of smears off to the upper left in all these sequins. Well, that's called coma, and coma control at f.95 is not very good. At f2, it starts to improve, and it's still not super great. So when there's specular highlights, really f2.8 to f4 is where you need to be to get the coma under control. And you know, so all those little specular highlights like stars and astrophotography will come into play. All right, so the 17.95, if we look at the coma of that, again you can see where this is having issues, and this is far worse than the 42.5. So not very good coma wise. When you step it down to f1.4 again, it's more controlled. But really, you need to get down to f2.8, f4 before you can actually do any kind of astrophotography with it. So there's no savings in the f.95 if you're wondering about that. Anyway, this is the swirly bokeh we're talking about. Now this is my alien skeleton head shot at f.95, and you can see the great swirliness of it, which I just love. And then, of course, at f1.4, then you can see the specular highlights. This is that sequin fabric again. And you can see the shape of the irises. And again, you don't always see this, but in this case you can. And I forced it like this. I wanted to set this up this way so you could see it. And then by the time you're at f4, or f4, this is what this looks like. But in high-res mode, which is what this was shot at, these lenses are crazy sharp. Lots and lots and lots of detail. Okay, so anyway, let's move on and see what lens flare is like on this. Let's look at some lens flare. Now this is the 42.5, and this is on an LED bulb, and right now we're all the way open at f.95. If I stop it down to f2.8, you'll notice it becomes really well controlled. Here's a CFL bulb with the same 42.5. And you can see it's actually pretty well controlled, and this is wide open. And if I step it down to f2.8, the flaring is almost gone completely. So, you know, overall the flare control is pretty good. Here's the 17.5 lens, and, you know, flare-wise, this is really obnoxious on LED at f.95. Now, if we stop it down to f2.8, you'll see that it controls it a lot better, but it's still overwhelming. And, you know, by the time you're down to like f5.6, it's pretty well controlled. Here's the 17.5 lens on CFL, and you can see on this one it's bleeding out a lot more than the 42.5 was as well. And so this is stopped down to f2.8. This is a little better. Yeah, so this particular lens with bright light sources is going to be a little harsh. So I know some of you are going to ask me, would I recommend this for astrophotography? And the answer is no. So other than being a really heavy lens, I mean, these things are just beautiful. And, you know, out of all the lenses out there, you know, they have all the problems that it seems like the smaller formats have. There's just a little bit of barrel distortion here and there, but then again, it depends on how close you are to an object, etc., blah, blah, blah. The barrel distortion doesn't really come into play unless you're shooting something dead square on, and it depends on your distance from that. So it just depends on how you look at it. I love these. I think that these are absolutely outstanding. And when I did all my research on f.95 lenses, on what exactly I was going to buy for myself, I found below the Leica Noctilux, of course, that these two, the 17.5 and the 42.5, seem to be the two sharpest that you could get your hands on besides the SLR Magic 50mm f.95. That one also seemed to be really good, but that was way more expensive than these were. So, you know, price point wise, these run about, I want to say, in the neighborhood of about $800 each. And you can probably find them used for a little bit less, but definitely worthwhile. I mean, I really like these. They're a little heavy. It's like, ugh, but what are you going to do, you know? The other thing, too, is these things are stupid sharp. Once you get from f1.2 all the way to f16, that entire range is completely usable. So it just depends upon how much depth of field you want to actually show in your images. But really, really strong lenses. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this review. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Otherwise, you guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you later. See ya.